Most people think that if a country's currency is weak, the country itself must be weak. That's what we're always told in the West. Strong countries have strong currencies, and weak countries have money that's worthless on the world stage. But what if that's not true? What if keeping your currency low isn't a mistake but a deliberate move? China did exactly that. For decades, it deliberately kept the yuan low, not because the economy was collapsing, but because it wanted to use it as a strategic move. And this single action reshaped the global economy from the ground up. To understand this story, we need to go back a bit. In the late 1970s, China had just emerged from the chaotic years of Mao's rule. The economy was closed, the people were poor, and the factories were outdated for that time. Then Deng Xiaoping stepped in and launched reforms that opened the country to the world. Factories began to multiply along the coasts, foreign investors poured in, and China's goal was crystal clear: to industrialize as fast as possible. But how do you sell your products to the entire world when you're just getting back on your feet? You sell them cheap. Very cheap. And the fastest way to do that was to keep the currency undervalued. No need for complicated economic jargon. Let's keep it simple. Let's say the yuan should naturally be $1 for 5 yuan. China, however, deliberately kept it at around 8 yuan per dollar. This made every product China sold abroad look much cheaper. How did they do this? The central bank constantly bought dollars and sold yuan. Every dollar that entered the country was practically stored in the treasury. By 2014, their reserves had reached $4 trillion. The result? The yuan stayed low, Chinese goods became even cheaper, and millions of American homes filled up with Chinese products. Think of it like this. Imagine Nike selling a $50 shoe worldwide for just $10. They'd lose some revenue in the short term, but in the long term, they'd crush all competitors. That's exactly what China did. It sold itself cheap to gain global dominance. From the 1980s to the 2000s, factories in China multiplied. Trade surpluses grew. Western consumers loved cheap products. Walmart shelves were overflowing with Chinese goods. Meanwhile, Americans were saying, "Great, everything is so cheap." But the real winner of this game was China. The cheap yuan turned China's exports into an unstoppable force. They then used the dollars they earned to finance U.S. debt. In other words, Americans bought cheap Chinese goods, and China took those dollars and lent them back to the U.S. And the West still didn't understand one thing. A weak currency wasn't weakness, it was strategic power. Thanks to this, China gained time. It built factories, it built infrastructure, it lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty. Low exchange rates became a stepping stone for China. Of course, this strategy drew criticism. Washington spent years accusing China of currency manipulation. And they weren't entirely wrong. China was indeed managing the market in its favor. But this wasn't a trick, it was pure geopolitics. Cheap Chinese goods caused American factories to close and workers to lose their jobs. Cheap products made everyone happy in the short term, but in the long term, the West's industrial base almost completely collapsed. Over time, China became so powerful that it didn't even need a cheap currency anymore. After 2005, Beijing allowed the yuan to gradually appreciate, because by then, they had already achieved their goal: to control the world's supply chains. But their playbook didn't disappear, it just changed form. This time, instead of using the currency, they applied the same sell cheap, control the entire market tactic across industries: steel, solar panels, electric vehicles. Thanks to state support, Chinese companies sold at a loss but eventually eliminated competitors and took over the market. Today, Western countries impose heavy tariffs on Chinese EVs and solar panels, just like they complained about the cheap yuan years ago. But one thing hasn't changed. China is still willing to make short-term sacrifices to gain long-term power. And now they have a new goal: to turn the yuan into a global currency, signing oil deals in yuan, giving Belt and Road loans in yuan, developing a digital yuan. The purpose is the same: to one day become an alternative to the US dollar. In the West, a weak currency is seen as shameful, but China showed that it can be a powerful tool. It chose power over prestige, and while the West enjoyed cheap products, it also lost its own industry, and went into debt on top of that. The lesson today is very clear. The numbers on the currency board tell only a small part of the story. A weak currency doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it's strategy, and strategy almost always wins. History doesn't repeat, but its rhythm stays the same. Rome diluted its coins. Spain flooded Europe with silver. The US prints dollars. and China kept the Yuan cheap to build its power. Different tools, same game. Money is never neutral. It's always a balance of power. And if this gave you a new perspective, don't forget to subscribe and like. History has already given the answers. I'm just showing you where to find them.